Hello, this is Thomas Hudson, the Walking Veteran. I'm also known as the Talking Veteran. You're listening to TTBR, the Talking Veteran Radio Network. And if you would like to call in and listen, call 1-631-359-8313. Save that in your cell phone. Call 631-359-8313. You'll hear me on there. You'll hear some other interesting guests and music. The Talking Veteran Radio Network. Today I want to talk to you about a subject that is not exactly the prettiest subject that people want to discuss, and that is suicide prevention. And particularly I want to talk about suicide prevention in the Veterans Affairs healthcare system. This is a system that is broken down. The elements involved don't work in concert with each other, and I'm talking about on the front end is the health care that is rightfully due to our veterans, and then on the backside is the prevention of suicide. And so you're going to hear a conversation with the VA's Veterans Suicide Hotline. That's 1-800-273-TALK. You're going to hear the Talking Veteran talk to them and explain the scenario of a veteran's situation, asking them, what would you do? This is Thomas Hudson, the Walking Veteran and the Talking Veteran. And so let's go to our call to the Veterans Affairs Crisis Hotline.
You have reached the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, also servicing the Veterans Crisis Line. If you are in emotional distress or suicidal crisis or concerned about someone who might be, we're here to help. Your call is now being transferred to the Veterans Crisis Line. Your call will be recorded. Your call may be monitored for quality assurance purposes. During the silent transfer, you may hear beeps. Please stay on the line as your call is transferred to the next available VCL responder. Calling the Veteran Military Crisis Line. This is Annie speaking. How may I help you?
This is who speaking?
Annie.
Annie, my name is Thomas. If you have time, I'd like to talk to you for a few moments. Is that okay?
That's perfectly fine. Are you having any current thoughts for suicide tonight, Thomas?
Let me put it like this. I'd like to give you a scenario.
Okay.
This is pertaining to something that a veteran is going through. And then I would like to ask you, after you hear the scenario, think in terms of it was you, your dad, or a loved one. What would you do? What would you tell this person? There's this veteran, he's 67 years old. And several years ago, he was diagnosed with level 1 stage 4 cancer, in which they found a tumor in his ileum, which is part of your colon, caused a small bowel obstruction, and they had to remove half of his colon, some intestines, and lymph nodes. And they discovered in that operation that the tumors had spread to his liver. 6 months later, they operated on his liver, and they discovered there was tumors in every segment of the liver except one. 2 years ago, it was discovered that the tumors had spread to the pancreas head, or the duct head of the pancreas, which caused pancreatitis. And he was in a VA hospital for 2 weeks. They transferred him by charter flight to another VA hospital for 2 weeks, back to the other VA hospital for 2 weeks. Now, presently, he's got several issues. He was supposed to have a CAT scan on his neck because they found lumps in the back of his tongue. Also, he has very extended stomach due to probably tumors in his liver, and very swollen legs with cellulosis. Do you know what cellulitis, I believe it's called? It's an infection. It's very painful and has to be treated by antibiotics. If it spreads, it can be very deadly. Also, recently he had a fall, which he hurt the side of his right side of his rib cage. Didn't break no bones, but of course it bruised the muscles pretty good. And then the pain and dealing with the tumors, the pain of the infection in his legs, the swollen legs, which feels like he's walking on a broken bone. And then he's got a very enlarged prostate, which they had to put him to sleep and do some things, and plus put a catheter in him and things of that nature. Now, this guy goes to the oncologist. Oncologist was very concerned because the condition he looked in compared to a month earlier. She ordered a ultrasound of the bladder. Well, this student, a student nurse practitioner from another town, she decides to take him, not for an ultrasound, but takes him down to the hallway by the elevators. And in front of these elevators is where a lot of people sit, either waiting to get a colonoscopy or waiting to see loved ones in ICU. And what she tells him in front of these people, at a restroom that was by the elevators, that you got to go in there and pee. And the veteran looks at her, what are you talking about? You've got to pee there. You got too much water built up, and you stay in there until you can pee it out. And so he said, ma'am, that is a huge waste of time. Don't you think that he's tried? And so things went on. One of the ladies sitting there made a comment. Another veteran made a comment. Then a nurse came by, got involved, and the nurse practitioner student, she gets upset and leaves. The veteran's crying. He goes down to CAT scan where he was supposed to have a CAT scan on his neck, was told that it had been canceled because he didn't show up. And he says, wait a minute. The oncologist was supposed to call. And yes, but that was an hour and a half ago. I said, but this nurse practitioner wanted him to go pee. And that was her words, not urinate, to pee in front of everybody. And then he didn't get not only get the CAT scan, he didn't get his chemo shot, which is over $4,000 of taxpayers' money that was wasted. And then next day, this gets into a long story, but he's been fighting for medical care. The next day, the oncologist told him he had to go to the emergency room. He goes to the emergency room, and they give him some pain medicine, an antibiotic for his legs, and then he's discharged. The next morning, the oncologist says, you got to go to urology. So he goes there without knowing that he was going to be put asleep and go in the hospital overnight. So he had his pain medicine with him. And because he's going in the hospital, they take up his pain medicine, which was 60 pills minus 2. We took one the night before and one that morning, and they destroy it. They will not allow patients come in there with narcotics, nor can they keep it because they're afraid the employees will steal it. So when he was discharged abruptly the next day, the doctor in the hospital only prescribed 16 pills. And plus, these type of pills, hydrocodone, he's not even supposed to take. It has way too much Tylenol in it, considering the tumors in his liver. That was something that a very notable oncology surgeon from Houston, Texas, who also does liver transplants for the VA, had advised him. And so just a struggle to get pain medicine. Today he talked to a nurse, and she gives him what I call a VA politically correct answer. The CDC has cut back on them giving pain medicine out. And Excuse me, what if that was your dad? What would you say to any veteran when they run out of options what to do? You're in the business of preventing suicide, right?
Yes, sir.
So on the other end, on the front end, how do you effectively talk to a veteran and tell them don't commit suicide because there's hope when there really is no hope, because anybody with cancer like that and all the pain issues that he has. Also bladder spasms, if you ever experience that, that is excruciating pain. So how do you effectively try to talk someone out from committing suicide?
Well, I mean, essentially I do the best I can, but I can do my best I can to give you options, because there is options. You talk about the options of living, and you talk about the options of dying.
Well,
And what you think is
based upon that scenario I just told you, if there's no hope, you can't get relief from pain, and plus you can't get the proper medical care, and you have student nurses telling you to go pee in front of everybody. He was so humiliated he started crying.
Yeah, and it's terrible. And
Now, are you aware of any kind of scheme, plan, ideas of the VA cutting back on treating the older, aging veterans with chronic illnesses, like those that come from the Vietnam era, cutting back on their medical care because the overwhelming numbers of young veterans returning back are needing the treatment? Are you aware of any kind of plan like that?
I am not. And even if that's the case, that's not the veteran's problem. If the VA is understaffed, they can't make those accommodations to get there.
I agree with you on that, but however, if I can let you know this, several years ago, there was some VA medical centers, and by the way, each VA medical center is a standalone hospital. There is no such thing as one national monolithic system. It's why they call it integrated system. So each VA sets their own policies and everything else. Some places, to make things look good, they came up with these appointment scandals, like Phoenix several years ago. 26 veterans died waiting for medical care. Guess what? They were older veterans. Out in Las Vegas, they came up with a different way of doing it, so it makes them look good. Even a former Secretary of the VA, Robert Bob McDonnell from the Obama years, got up in a press conference and he said it was the aging Vietnam veterans that were straining the VA. My position is, if you don't want to take care of them when they get home, don't send them to war in the first place.
Right.
And then the other thing, the older veterans are discovering that there's like discrimination because of age, because there's the emphasis more on the younger veterans because they can't take care of all of us, because they put funding in other places. And so then when you tell these younger veterans not to do certain things, but then you hear their stories about the VA. I'll give you an example. There was a veteran out of Clarksville, Tennessee, served in the Army, deployed 3 times, one to Afghanistan, 2 to Iraq. He got messed up because an IED went off. In the vehicle in front of him, 3 of his buddies got killed. He comes back all messed up, and so disabled, completely disabled. Well, him and his wife had to call the police one time because someone sprayed a bunch of graffiti on the back of their back fence. The police arrived, and what did they discover? They found an ashtray with a roach, a marijuana roach. They got arrested. what they ended up doing was moving to Colorado because the VA is not going to prescribe you marijuana, but they do want to give you a low dose of hydrocodone. I don't know if you know the difference, but it's not these people's fault. It's not a cancer patient's fault that these drug companies and some doctors wanted to give out pain medicine like candy and turn half of the country into drug addicts. It's not their fault, the ones that legitimately need something, but now you can't get it. A VA nurse gave me what I call a VA politically correct statement. She stated that the CDC has recommended that they cut back on giving out pain medicine. And this particular veteran has never been a drug addict, no history of it. He doesn't even ask for pain medicine all the time, but in a concurrent condition, he asks for it. How do you tell what I just described? If that was your dad, what would you say to your dad?
I would say, I know that you're exhausted. I know that you're tired of fighting, and I know you're hopeless. But let's think of other ways or other outsources throughout the outside of the VA to get you some care.
Okay, now you say outside the VA, but anything outside the VA is going to cost you money. Why should a veteran go outside the VA in the first place when he should be getting the medical care that they all deserve? My position is if you don't want to take care of them when they get home, don't send them to war in the first place. But
I agree with what you're saying, Thomas, and I think that you're right. You shouldn't have to think of alternative options, but due to the severity of your medical concerns, if you're talking about yourself or whoever I'm speaking of, I would do it just because I would want to live, to continue to live. And I know that the VA care that I'm receiving is not enough. It's not satisfying. It's not adequate. And I'm suffering. So I want to feel better. So I would seek elsewhere before I get to the point where I'm thinking I have no options and I'm ready to end my life.
Have you ever seen someone actually die in front of you?
No, sir, I haven't.
Well, I've seen two people. Before I was even engaged or married, I gave up a very good job. I was a manager in a bank, just got that job, 26 years old. And I went back home to take care of my dad because the hospital released him because there was nothing else they could do. He had bone cancer. And during that 3 months, I saw him go down, and suffer. The other person I saw, this was after I'd lost my family. I gave up everything, sold my house, everything, took care of my mother. She had Alzheimer's. Those are two deaths you do not want to see in front of you. My dad suffered, and I was thinking at that time, of course that was in 1979, that if you could give him anything, who cares at that stage? But now it's a struggle. It's a fight. Even these younger veterans are having to fight, and their families, their wives are having to fight to get the care. So my question to you is that you on your end that tries to prevent suicide, how do you correlate that with on the front end when the people that should be helping are actually the ones who are causing a veteran to look to suicide to end the suffering and the pain? How do you answer that one?
I don't know. Thomas, I'm just one person, and I'm doing my best to prevent suicide the best way I can by being there for veterans. I understand the inadequacy of the VA's care for veterans. I hear it every single day, and I really wish there was personally something that I can do, but I know there isn't.
But on the end that you're trying, how do you? I mean, do you have any suggestions?
I mean, the best suggestion I have is, like I tell them, if they're unhappy with VA care, I always tell them to call the White House hotline, make a complaint, make a claim. I always validate your experience, because I do want to do that, Thomas. I hear everything you're saying, and what you experience is not right. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. You should receive better medical care. You shouldn't have to fight to get the medication that you need to help maintain the level of pain that you're in, because you're experiencing chronic pain.
Are you a veteran? Are you a veteran?
Not.
And do you mind if I ask, are you actually a VA employee?
I am.
Okay, the reason why I ask, sometimes when your call center up in New York gets full, it rolls over to a contract call center. But I had a friend, and she used to work for the state of Nevada, and she worked on the suicide prevention hotline out there. And she resigned, and she became a social worker. But the reason why she resigned, she said she got tired of making referrals to people who just referrals them to somewhere else. And so, several years ago, I was part of a group of veterans all across this country that the VA did surveys with, and it was about how they can improve the crisis hotline. And I was very active in that. And of course, the only thing they come up with was reprogramming the VA hospital's phone number, where we don't have to hang up and dial 1-800-273-TALK. We could push option number 7. One of the things that came up with that no one even listened to us, and that is working on the front end. The front end, as I was speaking about, because it goes all together. If the elements of all this system doesn't work together, then it makes the other one very hard to deal with. Several years ago, I guess about 12, 15 years ago, the VA came out with statistics, 22 a day. You know what that means, right?
I believe it's recording how many veterans commit suicide.
On the average, 22 veterans commit suicide every day. That's 12 to 15 years ago they came out with that. One of the things that the general public doesn't know, that the VA doesn't publicly put out there, is that over 50% of those 22 a day are actually 50 and older and not connected with the VA. So the question came up one time, were they ever connected with the VA? And that's the question that is put out to, no matter if you're young or old or what. And one of the things I want to say up front, I am personally very appreciative of the VA for various reasons. However, because we live in a country where even our government is held to accountability, and we have a system called redress, meaning that from time to time, we want to not necessarily offer our complaints, but our suggestions. And because regardless if you're the VA or a civilian hospital, that input is very important. So I want to tell you right now, my name is Thomas Hudson, and the person I give you the scenario about is me. So what would you tell me to do?
I know that you mentioned earlier about cost and stuff outside of VA. Do you have any other healthcare benefits? Are you connected, or have you heard anything about the Mission Act, how you can receive treatment outside of the VA?
No, and I will tell you this. Number one, veterans are exempt from, what is that called? Back in the day, they called it Obamacare, but it's called, help me out, what was it called? The Health Care Act.
How about Medicare?
The Affordable Health Care Act.
Okay.
So veterans do not have to join that, and they don't have to take out the Program B under Medicare because they go to the VA. So now, because it's gone by so long, going outside is really not an option. Even if you get approval from the VA, starting all over again with a civilian doctor is not as simple as one might think.
Yeah, that's true.
And especially when, particularly me, and I've gone through several major surgeries. The only thing that I want is someone to not look at me like I'm just some homeless bum, or I never went to school, or I could go on and treat me with a level of dignity and respect, because in medical schools today, these young doctors learn that the greatest source of information that you can obtain actually comes from your patient. So having said that,
is there an option? Because are you going to what VA do you go to currently?
well, I'd rather not say at the moment, but I gotta be. I'm supposed to be there tomorrow. It's in another state right now. I gotta go to a follow-up appointment with urology and surgery, and those people. What happened last week, and there's a story about that on walkingveteran.com, and you'll see a picture of me, and the title is, what do you tell a veteran, or how do you tell a veteran not to commit suicide? In other words, what do you tell somebody in my position? Don't relieve your pain by going out and buying insulin, which you could buy over the counter without a prescription. There's 3 types. If you're not a drug addict, not a drug addict, but if you're not a diabetic and you took a vial of insulin, that's 700 milligrams, and inject that, wow, that's going to drop you down till you bottom out and you pass out, and you go to sleep permanently. But when you have a veteran like myself who doesn't have his 2 children, his wife, no family left, and going through cancer and life by yourself is no fun. What do you tell someone like that?
Well, I would say let's talk about our options, because it sounds like that you're thinking of suicide as an option. You mentioned about insulin.
Well, I mentioned insulin because that's not anything new. There was a case many years ago out of Rhode Island where this billionaire, they had to exhume his wife's body and found out that she died of insulin overdose, and she wasn't diabetic. That was Klaus Van Buren case. That was on Court TV. So when I mentioned something like that, a lot of people, even doctors, didn't know you could buy insulin over the counter without a prescription. There is 3 types that you could buy. They'll even sell you the bag of 10 syringes and not even ask any questions. That is just one option. To me, that's more of a painless option. Stuff like shooting yourself in the, ooh, that's too messy. We could go on and on and on. There's all kind of stuff on the internet anyway. So when you have the option of just simply going to sleep and pretty much painless, because that particular type of death was researched by 4 different doctors, by myself, and each doctor said that if you had seizures and you would already be in a coma and you wouldn't feel nothing. So when you inject insulin, you're not a diabetic. When you get down to 60, you go into what they call hypoglycemia. And then on down, you'll just end up bottom out. So here's the question. You're in a lot of pain. Versus what I just described just a moment ago. What is your option? How do you tell veterans not to do something when they're seeking relief? There was a movie about the New York Port Authority police during 9/11. And some of them got trapped under a building across the street. When it collapsed, this great big old concrete boulder fell right on across this police officer. He laid there for 2 days in excruciating pain. And then eventually he took his service weapon out and committed suicide because the pain was just beyond human belief of handling it. There's all kind of scenarios like that. So what do you tell a veteran? What is the option?
I mean, it's different per veteran. You know, right? You said you don't have any family living, and you're going through cancer by yourself. You know, your life seems very, very hopeless right now. So I wanted to ask you, what are some positive things in your life that you can think about that are worth living for?
Well, you know, I could say with one thing about me, if you knew anything about me, my positive things have always been what I've done. Not necessarily what I will do, but what I've done. And regardless of what anybody thinks about me around this country, I dedicated my life, especially after I got sick, to working with veterans and and I've talked to quite a few of them, trying to talk to them and not doing what they contemplate doing and seeking to get them the help. And I don't mean just referring them. If you knew what I do, of course we have a big network, but veteran, especially, it gets my attention. And I think it's so beyond belief what they're telling me. Yeah, I'll go to battles for them, and I'll contact congressional military liaisons around the country, or contact directors of hospitals and things of that nature, and say, what in the world is going on? Because sometimes when you put out the public awareness, sometimes these people might start listening. If you go to a website called walkingveteran.com, I'm the one that walked 3 years ago. My cancer was in remission. I went from Las Vegas, Nevada, to talk to Congress in Washington. You'll see me there with all kind of big shots. You'll see me in a ceremony with the president, the secretary of the VA, a bunch of senators. You know, what does it matter? What it matters is these people get up all the time and say, we want to honor our men and women in uniform. But then what do they do? Is it just a bunch of empty words?
So when you went to that meeting, did they do anything? They listened to what you had to propose to help veterans?
Oh, yeah, some things happened for a lot. There were some things that happened back then that was very heartwarming. But it's a shame that someone even has to walk across the country to bring awareness, honoring, learning, and delivering that message to our elected officials in Washington. But it's an ongoing struggle. Today, everybody wants to cut back on funding when the wars are winding down. But I have a philosophy: if you don't want to take care of them when they come home, don't send them to war in the first place. Now we're seeing these younger veterans, as they're getting in more in the VA system, and I'm talking about the ones that's got some serious illnesses. It's a struggle, and their families are struggling. Why is it's destroying marriages and stuff like that? Now, a lot of veterans will take an offense of what I'm about to say, what I'm saying now, because they don't have to deal with a chronic, serious illness. So they're in a different category. But when you have a former secretary of the VA in a press conference say that it's the aging Vietnam vets with chronic illnesses that is straining the VA system, how heartbreaking is that? Here, those Vietnam vets, you lied to them for all those years. It took 25 years for them to recognize Agent Orange. You find out it was a conspiracy between the chemical company Monsanto and the Defense Department. And they sprayed all that Agent Orange all over those troops and Marines and sailors all over Vietnam. It took them 25 years to recognize that. So now, then there's some other issues. I could go on and on. How do you tell these veterans with a straight face and good conscience, don't commit suicide? And then, if you did do what you call a rescue, and they end up in a VA psychiatric unit, those places look like federal prisons. They're what you call stabilization units. They're just to get you over the hump for a few days, and then you're back in the real world struggling. So it's like an engine. If you don't have all the elements, the cylinders working in concert with each other, then are we wasting our time? Well,
not necessarily. I mean, if you feel like that, like you're saying, if you feel like the work that you're putting in and the resources that you have are not helping, then it does feel like it's a waste of time. I can't speak on all VA. Like I said, I've heard this numerous times. I really wish it was a magic thing I could tell you. But I know that, you're in a lot of chronic pain, and I know you want to be able to ease that pain. And that's why I said I would definitely get connected with a mental health provider, talk to somebody long-term about the pain that you're in.
A mental health provider about pain? What are they going to do?
They can at least hear what you have to say, validate your experiences.
And that's it? I mean, you're validating what I'm experiencing by listening to me.
Well, that too. You can call the crisis line every day if that helps you well.
No, I'm not going to waste resources because I know you got a lot of people. You got a lot of people. The only way that I could talk to you as we are right now is by, well, I don't want to tell you about it, but I'm sitting real still. My legs, excruciating pain. I just go on and on. Have you ever experienced a bladder spasm?
I have not, sir.
Oh, me, excruciating pain. Excruciating. And that goes along with the other things. Your chest starts hurting every once in a while, going back and forth. You scared to death you're going to have pancreatitis coming on again. That is a lot of pain that is beyond explanation. And, I could go on and on and on. Cellulitis is an infection in both of my legs now. And if it spreads any further, it can be very deadly, but it's also very painful. And hopefully the antibiotics, which I've been taking for, a week now,
has it subsided any of your pain a little bit?
No. The only reason I'm talking right now is I've taken extra pain medicine. And this stuff about pain medicine, it's a joke. I shouldn't be taking what they prescribe because of the Tylenol in it. You don't give a patient with tumors all over their liver medicine with a bunch of Tylenol in it. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. You could research it online. You could do a lot of things. But anyway, listen.
Like you need emergency services at all, Thomas, tonight?
No. I mean, for what? You see, one of the things people don't realize about emergency rooms. Number one, many, many, many years ago, I used to work in a part of the emergency room in a very large teaching hospital in Georgia. And you saw a lot of people that come in and abuse the emergency rooms. We always knew when it was 5 o'clock on a Friday evening, that's when all the drug addicts start coming in with toothaches and want to tell the doctor what they can't take and what they can take. And so I don't run off every time I have a little side pain to emergency room, especially with my type of cancer, because emergency rooms will treat you symptomatically. And by the way, because of that, if I wasn't in my right mind and couldn't articulate my health problems, like my rare form of cancer called carcinoid tumors, then they could give me something that could end up causing me going a carcinoid crisis and lead to death. For instance, like another pain medicine, tramadol. If you research that, it can interfere with your serotonin reuptake. There's all kind of different medicines that you think might be simple, but you just can't give it to me. So going to an emergency room, if I went to a civilian emergency room right now, they're just going to treat me symptomatically and say, there's nothing we could do further because you need to go back to the VA. The only thing I want from the VA is simply reasonable, proper medical care. Do you know anything? I'm gonna just assume, if you don't mind, you're married to a man, and or you know something about your dad, prostate issues. Is that correct? You know anything about prostate? Well, you don't tell an older man who's got a very enlarged prostate. You can look at my CAT scan and figure that one out. And stand in a hallway with a bunch of other people and tell me he's got to go in the restroom to pee it out, to get the water retention off of him. Do you call that reasonable medical care? I could stay at home and try that. Don't you think? That's what I told that lady. I asked her, what medical school did you go to? Because don't you think I've tried that? I wouldn't be coming to a hospital if I didn't. Things like that. And then the Foley or catheter they put in me, when you have these muscle spasms, instead of going through the bag, it's coming out the other way. And so, yeah. And when you've been begging your oncologists and about changing this pain medicine around because it's not working, it's a struggle. And to hear that our federal government has told all these doctors to cut back because of some drug addict academic in this country, it is not the cancer patient's fault or any disabled veteran coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan's fault, because the drug companies from the 90s sold all this stuff on everybody. And now they've got a war on this opiate addiction. Well, what do you give them for pain then? To the ones who really need it. So you feel really guilty, number one, because it's yourself. You're not trying to fight for someone else. You're fighting for yourself just to get the proper medical care. And, you know, several years ago, I had to have a little operation. Would have normally been a daycare or a day surgery, but it kept me overnight to monitor me because of my condition. Well, I suggested to the doctor before they put me to sleep to check my serotonin levels. His attitude was, oh, we know what we're doing and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? When I came out of surgery, I ended up in ICU for 5 days. Evidently, I had a carcinoid crisis in there because no one checked my serotonin levels. And when it was checked, 2 weeks later, it was well over 500. That's what you call carcinoid syndrome range. Sometimes people need to stop and listen to the patient. And that's the other big thing I have a problem with. I can get doctors here to take the time to go in your system, what is called BIZA, and check other records from different VAs as far as And especially the research doctors out of Houston, and the oncology surgeons and specialists from Baylor College of Medicine. Why did they do things a certain way? It's a matter of communicating and listening and researching, and we could find out all the answers and work together. Well, I'm sorry if I bugged you.
No, you didn't, sir. And I just want to continue to check in with you. Have you had any past thoughts of suicide with the chronic pain that you're experiencing?
I'm going to leave that with a rhetorical question. I will first tell you the other side of the question that people would ask. I am probably about the most harmless person you will ever meet. I don't even cuss nobody. I try not to yell, but I did yell at my children once in a while and they get on my nerves, but I'm harmless. But the other part of that question, what have we been talking about? What would you do? And then you'll have the answer.
Well, I heard you mention something about taking insulin.
I mentioned that as one. No, I mentioned that in a analysis point of view.
Okay.
And I use that as an example of there is so many ways to commit suicide. Some of the biggest ways of not doing it is overdosing on medication, because the human body is actually more resilient than people think. And you might take the risk of just waking up and being a vegetable the rest of your life. Another way of doing it is that when it goes below freezing, go out in the middle of nowhere, drink a whole bunch of like whiskey or something like that. I don't drink, but get a bunch of alcohol. Drink to the point that you just pass out. And what'll happen is that you'll pass out, and because alcohol makes your body feel like it's warmer, and you pass out, and then you're going to die of hypothermia. Out in Colorado, the VA out there, they find quite a bit of that happening out there. People go up in the mountains, or homeless people who drink because it makes them feel warmer, but they end up passing out and dying of hypothermia. So,
sir, do you have any intentions of doing any of these plans or things that you mentioned to me right now on this line?
I answered that question by reverting it back to the original question. What would you do if you was in my situation? Or what would you think your dad would do if he was in my situation and there's no hope of getting any help?
I think he would be resilient and still keep fighting for his life. I don't think that he would resort to suicide. Personally, if you're talking about my personal father, he wouldn't do that. He would suffer in silence.
You know what? I would say that. I would say that many times over about me. But we don't know until we get to that point, because the human body can only take so much pain. And I guess some people can handle pain a lot better than others. I don't know. But as far as making it sound like I'm a huge, if I could use it in layman terms, a big baby, I was diagnosed with this illness back in November of 2009. Never been.
I don't think that you're a big baby.
And if you looked at the 5-year survival rates, which is nothing but outdated statistics, because it metastasized to my liver, it makes it a distance spread, and my survival rates went down to 35%. Well, then my tumors had shrunk, went in remission, and so back in 2016, I decided to take a little journey. That's when I walked from Las Vegas, Nevada to Washington, D.C., and I will tell you right now, no, I did not walk all the way. I do not know how to walk across water, so I did not walk across the Mississippi River. And then there was times I had to be rescued and stuff like that, and so, but I did walk most of the way, I will say that, and that was about awareness, honoring, learning, and delivering our message to our elected officials in Congress. Part of that journey was about delivering secret recordings, 3 of them made by VA doctors. You see, if a veteran goes outside the VA and goes to a local congressman's office to complain, they're going to send a letter through the director of the VA hospital and they'll sign it to someone. They're going to make you look like a mental health nut. If you're an employee, regardless if you're a doctor or what, they will crucify your career. I could tell you some horror stories about these 3 doctors. Just unbelievable. Because you got to understand, as much as we love our country, the VA is still a government bureaucracy. It should have never been a department. It should have been operated as a government corporation. Do you know what a government corporation is?
Something larger than a department, like you said.
The largest government corporation that the United States government owns is called Tennessee Valley Authority. It was set up in the 30s by Congress to provide low-cost energy to the Tennessee and Ohio Valley. And what that means is a government corporation. It means it's owned by the government, but it's not of the government. When we bailed out General Motors, the government actually owned General Motors, but it was not part of the government. That means that if it operated as a government corporation, then you get all these stupid government regulations out of the picture, and also be able to hire people who actually know how to run hospitals rather than put all this politics into it. A healthcare system should not be about politics. And anyway, that's one of the things I've advocated over the years. Now, there's a difference between privatization and government corporation. And what did I mean by stupid government regulations? Out in Las Vegas, Nevada, a brand new VA hospital at the time, this veteran shows up and he goes for an appointment. He goes back out, discovers someone broke into his car and stole all of his CDs, music. So he goes into the VA police and thinking that all they have to do is look at their cameras and video and they could tell who done it. Guess what? They can't just do that. And so he wants to talk to a detective a week later and see what's going on. He can't do that. He's got to go to medical records and fill out a form for the privacy officer and freedom of information request. 2 weeks later, he gets a letter with a tracking number. A month later, he finally finds out something that they didn't find out anything. But yet, if you was in the civilian world and you had to call the police to your house, you could call a week later, see if it's been assigned to a detective, and talk to him right there on the spot without having to fill out a Freedom of Information Act request. These are all systems. A hospital...
And I hear you, Thomas, but I'm really concerned tonight about your safety and yourself.
You're concerned about my safety?
Yes, I'm concerned about you.
I'll tell you what, why don't you call my oncologist? Why don't you call that nurse that I was talking about? Why don't you call several other people and ask them, are they concerned about my safety? When they left me, when they dumped me out of the hospital and I had to walk down a very steep hill in the cold with the pain and the swelling of the legs and could barely move, were they concerned about my safety?
I don't know. I have nothing to do with those people. I just want to know if you're going to be safe tonight.
Well, anyway, listen, I want to say thank you for talking with me. And I mentioned something about looking at walkingveteran.com.
I will check that website out.
There's another website, but if you happen to Let's see here. Let me get that number. If you happen to call this phone number, and it's out of New York, 631 359 8313. That is 631 359 8313. That is known as the Talking Veteran Radio Network. So the recording of this call will be on that radio show for tomorrow. And that'll probably be the last one I do.
Well, Thomas, have you ever had an attempt in your lifetime? Ever tried to end your life with suicide?
We're trying to go around the back door, aren't we? I told you I don't want to talk about. Let's put it this way. If I was going to commit suicide, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
Okay.
But I do thank you for talking with me. Remember, how do you tell any veteran what to do under these circumstances? Anyway, thank you very much. And this is Thomas Hudson for the Talking Veteran Radio.